Welcome to On Point. My name is Tim Murphy, and today I am joined by Sophie Edwards. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Tim.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Sophie is the Northeastern Representative for the Ontario Arts Council, and she's just recently arrived in Sault Ste. Marie, traveling across the north, touching base with the different communities that the Ontario Arts Council will represent, will service in the north. You are from originally Manitoulin Island, you said?
Well, I live there now. I grew up in little towns in the north. So I was born in ONNpoint Falls, and we hopped around and then spent a lot of time in Whitefish Falls, which is a tiny little town just north of Juneau.
Okay, so that's where, because my partner works in film, and they just shot a film with Tantu Cardinal, the Indigenous actress. It was called Falls Around Her, and yeah, they worked on that film, and that was rough. That was a rough shoot. They were out in the mud and tents and everything. So I'm looking forward to seeing that film after I saw the footage that Keith took of him walking through the mud. I thought, wow. Did that talk about some issues you have to deal with when you do stuff up in Northern Ontario?
Yeah.
So you're familiar with the North, obviously.
Yes.
How did you get involved with the Ontario Arts Council then?
Well, they had a job posting. Yeah. Well, I worked in the arts for quite a while. I was one of 4 women that founded an arts organization on Manitoulin Island, and shortly, probably within about a year, it was down to me. And I think they had other things in their lives, and I think they saw the writing on the wall that this was going to be a tough go.
You were the last woman standing.
Yeah, last woman standing, and a bit bullheaded I am.
You have to be if you're going to be an artist.
You've got to be bullheaded if you're going to be an artist, and if you want to start an organization, because that's a whole other animal. So I did that for 15 years, mostly about 12 of those as a volunteer and juggling other jobs like we do in the North, 2 or 3 jobs at a time, and being a single parent and going to school and all that jazz. And then, the organization, actually, we managed to get it incorporated and quite established, and has operating funding from the Arts Council now. So over the years, writing a lot of grants, a lot of grants.
So you were very familiar with the Arts Council and what they could offer you as an artist and an artist in the North.
Yeah, and doing that work, I was quite familiar with the challenges working in the North and realizing that when you part of the reason I started the organization is that I wanted to see certain things happening on the island, and I, as an artist, wanted the space to do that and the supports, and they weren't always there. So I started doing the organizing work, and you realize that you're kind of functioning at multiple levels all the time. So I was doing sectoral development work as well, trying to do that, but now I have an opportunity to do some of that work, supported to do that, because it was just another layer that I was adding on to my work as an organizer and administrator, and doing everything, the grant writing and running programs and all that kind of thing. So it's a great opportunity. So I come to the work with experience in the North, and having seen an organization go from an ad hoc collective to an incorporated, established organization. And I also taught in the community development program at Algoma U. So I have a background.
I saw that in your bio.
Yeah. So I bring that, so it's fun. And I've only been in the position about 6 weeks. So.
And you were saying how many miles have you, kilometers have you logged?
I've already put on 3,000, I think. So
because as the Northeastern Rep, your territory goes from
Wawa, Sioux, North Shore, over Hearst, Cochrane, and that end part of the world, and then Sudbury, North Bay, and over, and then south to Parry Sound.
You're all the way down to Parry Sound.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece of territory.
Yes, and my colleague in the Northwest, she covers over to the Manitoba border and then the far north.
And she's based in Thunder Bay?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So have they always had somebody?
No. It's great. I think it's a really good thing that they've done, the Arts Council. I think it's about 8 years now they've had a Northeastern representative. So it's great because, I don't know, it just we're out in the field, and it's our job to get out and meet with people one-on-one and connect with folks in the North and make sure they know about the programs and connect them with other people and really be a presence on the ground. Because, I mean, the organization is based in Southern Ontario, and we deal with different issues. So if you're based in the North, we're familiar and we get to know people. So I'm still, I've got lots of ground still to cover. And
was this your first? You were
No.
been to the Sioux already before in the last 6 weeks, or
no?
So since you started your position, this has been your first time
to the Sioux. Yeah, I've been into Sudbury a couple times. I was at the Salon du Livre. I think that was my first week of the job, and then down for an Art for Social Change
And
conference.
this has all been, your visit this time has been exactly what you've been talking about, is that one-on-one, talking to the artists and letting them know, finding out what their needs are and how the OAC
Yeah.
can help them.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about that, about what the, just a little background on the Ontario Arts Council itself as an organization, and then we'll talk about maybe some specific things that you've come across as a Northern Ontario artist and communicating with fellow artists in the North, okay?
Sounds great.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with more On Point with Tim Murphy and Sophie Edwards right after this. Thanks for staying with us on Point. Once again, I'm joined by Sophie Edwards from the Ontario Arts Council. Little backgrounder, Sophie, on the Arts Council itself. It's been around, I think, since the 60s or so, is that correct?
Yeah, it's just over 50 years old.
Wow, so am I.
Yeah, I know. I look back, just before I was born.
Yeah. And what was the reasoning behind starting the council?
Well, I think there was a need for it. There was sort of a really informal organization of artists, and it really makes a difference when it's formalized and when it's funded to be able to do its job. So there was a real move to establish the council, which was done, I think, 1963.
Okay.
And since then, I think the arts sector in Ontario has radically grown. I mean, it's significant, the change that has happened and the growth that's happened in the sector. In all kinds of art forms and disciplines, and organizations being able to receive operational funding, which makes a huge difference for organizations to do their work. So it's had a really great impact on the arts in the province.
The disciplines themselves, there are so many that are covered under the umbrella of the Ontario Arts Council. Can we talk a little bit about those?
Well, most things people would imagine: dance and theater, filmmaking, spoken word,
graphic arts,
performance, graphics, painting,
photography,
visual arts,
Oh.
and then community engaged arts, which is working with community members to create work with people who don't necessarily consider themselves to be formal artists, and I think you've done some of that work yourself. Yeah, pretty much every discipline is covered.
Did we talk about written writers? And
Oh yes, writers, yeah, literary arts,
absolutely,
and media.
Oh, that's right. There's a whole media component too.
Yeah.
And so in Northern Ontario, are there other areas that sort of require a little more assistance? I mean, do you have any focused areas that are really sort of specifically Northern Ontario? Oh, I think you have a group that's outside of Toronto, don't you? Like,
well, there are priority groups that the Arts Council focuses on, recognizing that they're underrepresented or they face challenges that other artist organizations might not face. So one of them are artists and organizations that are working outside of in regions outside of Toronto.
Right, okay, that's what I was getting at, that if you're not necessarily near a larger center, you're not going to have the same resources that those, I mean, if I'm living in Kitchener, I'm going to have a way easier time of accessing stuff that's in Southern Ontario as opposed to if I'm living in Hearst.
Yeah, so all of those, the priority groups are represented in all of the disciplines and all the funds, but then there's a specific fund called the Northern Arts Program that you might be thinking about that funds artists that are Parry Sound and North.
Okay.
So it has very specific programs. So in a way, it's a multidisciplinary program student. So rather than applying directly to, say, theater or music or dance or whatever, are performing arts, you're applying into Northern Arts, and it could be any discipline. And then their jury comes from Northern artists that work in the North.
Oh,
and
you're actually juried by people, your
your
fellow artists.
All of the programs they have juries that are from those disciplines, but in the case of Northern Arts, it would be artists that are from the North and work in the North and are familiar with those disciplines. So when the applications come in, depending on what kind of requests are made and what disciplines, they will find artists that are familiar with those disciplines, and they'll get together with their peers and they'll make a decision as a group about those projects. And like all of the other grants, they look at three areas. They look at artistic merit, impact, and viability of the projects. So they're all assessed in the same way.
Okay, artistic merit, I understand. That's pretty straightforward. Impact?
Impact. So it would be kind of thing. How does if you think about the things that you've seen or loved in programs or projects that you've loved, and why there are reasons they they affect us, or they create change, or they impact the community or the participants in some way, or they really help the artist develop their own career and their own practice. So it's what it does, and how it does the work.
And
how it
viability
changes us.
is
Is the project viable? Can it be done? Does the artist have the capacity and the support around the person or the organization to do it? What is the budget looking like? Is it adequately resourced? Does it have a great work plan? All the kind of things that you look at and you say, are they going to be able to pull this off?
Right.
Right.
And would sustainability be part of viability, or is that not so much an issue because some of these projects don't necessarily have to have a shelf life of several years?
Right. Usually in project funding, they're shorter term. We do have some grants that are 2 to 3 years, which is really great. In the last few years, they've been introducing longer projects. But project funding, the budget is more whether the project budget balances. So it has to balance out. The expenses have to equal the income for that particular project. But it's not necessarily, you don't have to make a case that you're sustainable and you're going to be around for 20 years or 30 years. It's difficult for anybody to say that.
We've been using a lot of terminology here that some people may find daunting, especially artists, because they're not necessarily, somebody who's a painter may not necessarily be great with the spoken word or typing or talking about that. So I want to come back after we have this break and talk about how the Arts Council can assist people actually with grant writing and how you guys provide a service to actually talk you through the process. So stay with us, and I'll be back with Sophie Edwards and the Ontario Arts Council right after this. More with ONNpoint. All right, we're back. Thanks for sticking around ONNpoint. Get how I said that? Sticking around ONNpoint? Yeah. I am Tim Murphy. This is Sophie Edwards from the Ontario Arts Council, the Northeastern Representative. We're talking about within the disciplines themselves. We talked about the many disciplines from dance to writing to graphic artists to music and playwriting and all that kind of stuff. Within each discipline, there are different kinds of funding available for different sorts of projects. So can you give me for instance, of some of the projects?
There's a whole range. There are all kinds of them.
Okay.
Anybody's interested, I encourage them to spend some time on the website.
Which is www.
arts.on.ca.
Okay.
So within the disciplines, there are grants, for instance, for research and creation, and then there are production grants, and there are presenting and touring grants. There's also career development. So if an artist would like to work with a mentor, they can apply for funding to support them to do that, to build their own practice. There are grants for organizations to like the Compass program helps organizations with projects to build their sustainability and to build their capacity as organizations. So there's a whole range of things from the gamut from really the beginning of the idea of a project and building it up.
The research and development, to actually presenting and then touring it.
Yeah. So there's a market development.
Absolutely.
For instance.
Now, before the break, I'd said some people might feel a little overwhelmed by the process of trying to do this grant writing and putting your proposals together. Does the OAC offer a sort of tutorials or mentorship and just how to put this stuff together, how to approach it?
There are a range of things that we offer. For the bare minimum, obviously, are the guidelines and the guidebooks that we have on the website. But for instance, myself and my colleague in Thunder Bay, we're available for artists. So that's part of what I do. So yesterday when I was here in the Sioux, I was meeting one-on-one with artists. It ranged. Some people are just beginning an idea and they're thinking through what are some of the things I should be thinking about. What are the project grants that I could be applying to? Can you have a look at this question on the application with me? Have I hit all the right points on the budget? So I can sit down with people. I can give feedback. We also, for folks that have challenges with actually doing the applications, there's a small fund where people can have help to write their applications. In some cases, for Indigenous applicants, there's an opportunity to do oral applications.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, there's a range of things. And I would just say that anybody, if they're to not stop from applying because they're feeling a barrier to apply. Contact me or somebody else at the Arts Council, and we'll help. And then it's challenging to write applications, and they're not always successful. But I tell people it's never a waste of time to write one, because every time we spend time on it, it helps us to articulate our project idea, to think about it more clearly, to think through what do we need to be able to get to pull this thing off.
It does. It really. The questions that you ask. I'm losing my earpiece. Sorry. The questions that you ask. Not that I want to hear what he has to say anyway. The questions that you ask really do help, though, in structuring your proposals. You know,
Right.
if I'm writing something and we need to know this. Oh, gee, I never thought about that. Well, what would the answer be? Da 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 da. And then if you need help, there you are. So. How long does it take? Well, and the other thing about grant writing, sorry, I'm all over the place.
You're out,
The other thing about grant writing is once you've written one, you can be, you realize, okay, there is a way to do this. There is a process. There are some key words you use, and the terminology and the phrasing, and you get better at it as you go.
Absolutely.
And you admitted that you were a champ at writing grants before you actually started working for the OAC.
Yeah, and not just for the Arts Council. Many project funds. I think I wrote about $1.5 million worth of grants, successful grants, and most of them small ones. So a lot of grant writing. And sometimes for a project, writing 3 or 4 times that project grant and reapplying and then finally getting the grant. So it's the stick-to-itiveness that you have to do, and that's a resourceful thing that artist organizations have to do. You have to keep at it. You remember the vision and the passion and the project idea, the excitement about it and what it means and what change it can make, and focus on that and keep working at those grant applications. And they do. Everyone helps us to focus on the project and think about what does it need and what parts are missing and how can we meet that need.
Do you ever have the scenario where somebody has written a grant one year and it doesn't get approved, but then they resubmit and maybe tweak it a little bit,
Absolutely.
and then it will get approved later
Absolutely.
on? Yes,
and that I've had the same experience. There's some projects it took 2 or 3, sometimes 4 applications.
Okay. We're going to take another break, Sophie, and then we're going to come back, and I would like to talk a little bit more about the North specifically, and some of the barriers that Northern Ontario artists face, and how you can help them overcome those barriers.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, once again, we'll be back on point with Sophie Edwards from the Ontario Arts Council right after this brief message.
Cool breeze.
Do you feel? All right, so Sophie, as with so many other areas of our life in Northern Ontario, there are certain barriers that we face that other communities don't necessarily face. So as far as artists in the North go, what kinds of issues are they looking at that might make things a little more difficult for them?
Distance. Distance is one. It seems like it might not affect things, but even particularly if you're in a rural area, access to resources, it can be a little bit more challenging to find the supports that are needed. Space. That's one of the reasons why I started the organization I did, because there weren't venues for exhibiting contemporary work or doing the kind of things we were doing. So sometimes you see a lot of artists in the North that are exhibiting in coffee shops, and which is great because then the general public sees the work. But in terms of professional spaces, there can be fewer spaces to do that. So artists have to be really innovative to find spaces to exhibit their work.
And they don't have a lot of income. Artists, I mean, traditionally wouldn't to rent anything on a long-term basis.
It's challenging. I think that's part of the reason why you see some innovations between groups working together. So some interesting combinations of
like co-ops and that kind of stuff.
People just exhibiting in different kinds of spaces or exhibiting outside of formal spaces.
Right.
It's also challenging when we have very small communities where they don't have the infrastructure, or the municipalities don't necessarily have the budgets like in larger urban areas to provide grants to individuals, artists, or to organizations. So we can't necessarily go to our township and make a contribution. So I know many communities, they'll be able to give a maximum of $200 a year or a few $100 a year to a nonprofit. And that doesn't go far when you're trying to run an organization or run a project. And we don't have in rural areas, there aren't as many businesses to go on. Then the local businesses are hit over and over again for sponsorships for everything. We don't have the population or the numbers. So if you're running sometimes if you're running programs that bring people in and you've got some ticket sales to do, you might make a little bit of money, but it's not going to cover all your costs. And many projects in the North and organizations, they want to keep their fees quite low and make it very accessible, again, because of our demographics. So it can be very challenging to find a range of funding sources to be able to support the programs. So they lean very heavily on public funding for their work and for their projects. Which is why it's additionally important that the Arts Council does recognize the additional challenge of artists and organizations working outside of Toronto, so that they get a little bit of a boost when they're applying to address those concerns, because it is so much more challenging to work in the north.
What kind of funding have you provided? Has the OAC provided for the Sault Ste. Marie area? Do you have any?
Well, I did a quick calculation this morning. I looked between 2015 and 2017. It was over $200,000 to organizations and individuals just in Sault Ste. Marie.
Just in Sault Ste. Marie.
Sault Ste. Marie, yeah.
Almost $250,000.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You guys,
yeah,
thanks.
it's exciting. Yeah, no, it's great.
You must be very. Well, you know, you must. It's proud. You must be proud to be working with this organization.
It's a really great opportunity. I love going around and talking to so many amazing projects and people doing really fabulous work, and to be able to help in whatever way I can. It's an honor, and it's exciting.
What about this most recent trip? While you're here, did you hear about some cool stuff going on in this?
Well, I met in Thessalon with the writers in the north, and
my sister Marilyn, I mentioned this as an author, and she was the one who actually pointed me in your direction because she knew about you going to Thessalon for that writers group, and she said you should see to get it on your show.
Yeah, well, we had a fabulous conversation there, and we met the folks from Algoma Trad who are working on building a facility
on St. Joe Island. Mm-hmm. That's yes, the O'Shraves and the Schreier family and Lefebvre. Yeah. They're legendary up in Sault Ste. Marie, and their music camp and the trad music. The trad, I guess it's a music festival. Yeah. So they're applying.
They're applying. They do receive funding from the Arts Council, but they're working on a much bigger project. They're doing a capital project.
Ooh.
The OAC doesn't fund capital projects. Oh, no. Yeah, a facility. Yeah. So we had great conversations yesterday. And I think you find that artists are really part of building those communities of peers and really innovators, and it really does impact our local communities when they're working. And then yesterday I was in the Sioux meeting one-on-one with artists and met some really interesting people. There's a young person who's starting a film company, and there's a young Syrian person who's lived in the Sioux for a few years now who helped produce a film that showed at Hot Docs last month. And the Urban Indigenous Youth for Change, they hosted the info session last night. So we had an interesting conversation, idea-generating conversation, and looking at some of the funds that are available. There's an Indigenous Culture Fund that is available for Indigenous projects, individuals, ad hoc collectives, organizations, and it's to support cultural knowledge transfer and any kind of art, craft or traditional practice.
Is Indigenous, that's one of the groups that you have.
It's a priority group.
The priority group. So Indigenous, another priority group is?
Francophone artists.
Francophone artists. We have a huge French population here.
Yeah.
And what else? Because I don't think we covered that yet.
So artists of color.
Artists with color, yeah.
Deaf artists and artists with disabilities.
That's a great one. And
Indigenous artists, artists working outside the regions of Toronto, and then new generation artists, which are artists between 18 and 30 years old.
Right. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
And there's so much information they can find online.
Or call me.
Or call Sophie. And look at that, Sophie. You say call me, and there it is on the screen. We have your number up. It's 1-844-711-5034. That's toll free. Or you can also go online to www.arts.on.ca. So we're going to be right back with more of Sophie Edwards and the Ontario Arts Council On Point with Tim Murphy right after this. Sophie, I want to thank you for being here today. I know that you have a crazy busy schedule, so I do appreciate you taking your time out to spend time with me.
Oh, I appreciate it, and helping get out the word about what we do, and me being in the region to help.
Excellent. And you know, one of the things that I think is fantastic about what the Ontario Arts Council can do is when you help people, artists who maybe don't realize that there are other ways that their art can work. For instance, I'm a big proponent of cross-sector development. For instance, using art in education, using art in health and well-being. There's a huge thing right now on mental health. Using art for how arts and sciences cross over. And you guys have information that you can inspire artists to think outside the box and use their talents to actually make a living. That's the whole idea, right?
We try.
And if you want that help, here's how you can find Sophie. We're on the screen right now. You're going to see Sophie's contact information, 1-844-711-5034. And of course, there's the website they can go to.
Yes.
Any closing thoughts from you, Sophie?
No, thank you so much. It's been great. It's been
Okay,
fun.
come back and see us again.
I will.
And you know what? Maybe the next time you're in town, we could bring some of the artists that you're working with, and we can talk about their projects.
That would be wonderful.
I would love that too.
Yes, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sophie Edwards, the Ontario Arts Council, and we'll see you next time on Point. I'm Tim Murphy. Bye for now.